Sooner fans and college football fans, welcome into another episode here on Oklahoma, the voice of college football. This is Oklahoma Sooners Live, and I'm joined by a very special guest, Chris Marler. And I literally just saw a comment too. Didn't even think about it. We've got almost the exact same name. But
Mhm.
Chris, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Of course, dude. Yeah, I saw that. I was like, that almost feels like it's this. I thought you were trolling me at first. I was like, maybe Oklahoma fans are being so nice to me this week, and I don't know why. Maybe this is all a trap. But no, I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I saw that you had a full day of just jumping all over and talking Oklahoma today. So I mean, hopefully you're prepared for tonight.
Yeah, I'm excited, dude. I got just like 400 milligrams of caffeine over here, so we're good to go.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you jumping on because it's a big weekend for Oklahoma, obviously, for the Oklahoma Sooners losing against Texas. A lot of, I keep on saying overreaction, but I get it.
Yeah.
It's an Oklahoma fan base that is truly used to winning, and they're used to, as much as people want to try to cut down Brent Venables, they're used to owning the Big 12. They're used to
Yeah.
dominating the Big 12. And obviously, that's what Brent Venables was trying to say because
It was a
14
wild
Big
tweet.
12 championships compared to the next being Texas with four. And the rest of the Big 12 right now doesn't even add up to have, I think, just as much as Oklahoma. Anyways, we're going to get into it tonight. I have Chris here to help me dive into and kind of preview the South Carolina matchup, which is a big one for Oklahoma to bounce back. Obviously, for Texas, they had that Florida loss, having to bounce back from that. And then for Oklahoma, a very similar situation where you lose to an opponent that you really shouldn't have lost to.
Mm.
There's a lot of things that go into that. We'll talk a little bit about that loss and then jump into the South Carolina game. But first, for everybody watching, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on X, jump over to YouTube and do us a quick solid and just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. All donations and super chats will be read live on the show. Anyways, let's just jump right into it. First, Chris, I mean, starting off with it, like I mentioned, it's an Oklahoma fan base that's used to just winning and just
Yeah.
not having to deal with too many losses, and really college football fans in general still not really getting used to this 12 team format in the college football playoffs where you can afford to lose a couple of games now. But for Oklahoma, obviously they shouldn't have lost to Texas. Do you think that the season is just at a complete loss now that Oklahoma's lost to Texas?
No, that's silly. I think that I wish they would have won because I am very vocal about this. Texas fans are. It's not even the fans. It's Texas media that is just so much. They're just so much, and it is wild that one of the first things you're supposed to do in this job is to like not be super biased, and like their whole existence is just like, have you guys heard about Texas football? Have you seen Texas football? Let me tell you about Texas football. And it's like, I got it. But no, I think that the loss sucks. I mean, Mateer being injured obviously didn't help. And maybe we shouldn't have been so gung ho on Oklahoma as much, maybe looking back at it, but hindsight's so easily 2020. Like you can look at this game and say, should they have played Hawkins? And you still feel a little bit more confident going in next week because you had your backup. If you do lose, I don't even know if he doesn't give you a better look considering he threw the 3 interceptions. All of this is hindsight being 2020. And the other part of it too is I think it's fair to say that we have been very high on an Oklahoma team because of their wins against Michigan and their wins against Auburn. Auburn is not that great of a football team, and Auburn is a couple plays away in that game from maybe winning it or maybe being being a little bit closer. But a lot of that's Jackson Arnold's fault. The other thing is Michigan. You have a true freshman quarterback making his first start of the road. Like the only road game they've played so far is Temple, and so I think there is cause for like concern or like pause for concern because there's some stuff that are like I think there are flaws and cracks in the foundation that we've probably overlooked because of how great they have looked at times. The defense is elite. John Mateer, when he's on, is one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the country. And the offense looks much different than it did a year ago. So the season's not over. You wish you had that win because it felt like you go into the season where I know this is super long winded, my bad, but like
No, you're good.
you go into the season, you're like, okay, Texas is probably a loss. You're 11.5 point underdog, and that's going to be a very tough win or tough game to win, especially for last year and it being like 34-3. Then you get into the season, it's like that's a dub. Like that is we are much better than Texas. I felt it. I thought it was like the lock of the week. Didn't listen to what Vegas was trying to tell us at all. So now you kind of come out of that limping and thinking like, well, like where do we go from here? Because you still have LSU, you still got Bama on the road. You get South Carolina this weekend. You got some other big games too. So it's not easy, man. It's not easy. So that loss is definitely it hurts for sure.
Yeah, and well, and you mentioned it too. So with Texas, Oklahoma fans, if Texas hadn't lost to Florida, I really think that they would have reacted to this loss a
Yeah.
lot differently. Obviously, the big one just being that John Mateer did not play well, had a really bad game, and you know what? Good players have bad games. The thumb obviously bothered him to some extent. I've said that several times. It either bothered him enough to not make certain throws, or it bothered him to where he didn't feel confident enough going into that game. One of the two. And obviously, he didn't practice full practice all week, and so
Yeah.
that's another big thing that you've got to take from it.
The biggest
And
game of the
so,
year.
yeah,
You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. Yeah, and I think that Oklahoma fans don't really take all of that into consideration. And then on top of it, this is also a Texas team that had their backs up against the wall. They were panicking the way that I think Oklahoma fans are starting to panic now, where the team didn't not really panic. They could have panicked.
right.
They could have freaked out because they lost to Florida, who they should not have lost to, and they ended up taking that loss and saying, "All right, we need to correct some things. We need to figure out a way to run the ball." And they corrected some things and figured out a way to run the ball.
Yeah.
And then figuring out a way to beat their rival in Oklahoma. So I really think that this is a Texas team that just found a lot of things out about their team in that loss, and it seems to me like they're on the right trajectory. But like you said, I do think there was a lot of maybe overhyping of the Oklahoma Sooners to some extent. I
Well,
predicted 8-4 on the season, and I think that's a fair assessment.
I think they could be better than 8-4. People got onto me from Oklahoma's fan base because I kept saying, like, we don't know what Mateer is going to be coming into this league. He's only played, I think he only had like one start against like a ranked P4 opponent.
Yeah,
And it was like, we have a new OC and you have a um, new quarterback, and you're coming into a league where Venables hasn't been great necessarily. Like, I mean, like, listen, that Venables win against Bama last year felt a lot like that 2021 A&M win, where it's like everyone's starting to get kind of out on him. They're frustrated, but you get this big win against a huge, huge name brand, and that's a great night. It's a great celebration. You celebrate the wins, but then like you lose over 40 players, I think, in the portal, and you have all these like question marks coming in. My biggest thing, though, and I look at this every year going into the season, which I mean everyone does, but like I feel like in the SEC, we don't always know who's going to be great and like that. You can pretty much bank on the fact you're going to play between 4 to 6 ranked opponents no matter what. And Oklahoma's schedule is a gauntlet, man. It is a
yeah,
gauntlet. And so I was saying a couple weeks ago, and it's like even when they were 4-5-0, you have this defense that's like putting up historical numbers for the first month of the season. You haven't gotten to the meat of the schedule, and the meat of the schedule is still like every single team feels like it was ranked. And so yeah, I mean, I don't know if 8-4 is where they're going to be. I almost feel like a loss to Auburn in the start of the year, or maybe even a loss to Michigan, would have been better for this team in the long run than this loss. And that's only
yeah.
because I say, like, you look what happened with Alabama and the Florida State loss, and like that didn't affect him in the SEC play. But like sometimes a loss where you have to quickly evaluate what is going wrong and what you need to improve is the best thing that can happen to a team that's trying to win a national championship.
Yeah, well, and for this Texas team too, I think a lot of Oklahoma fans and some outside of Oklahoma fans as well just consider Texas to be a bad team, and that's
Yeah.
just not the case. They
It's
had
not
one
everywhere, man.
one bad loss, and honestly, you look at the Ohio State game. Ohio State didn't have their best game, neither did Texas, and that was just a sloppy Week 1
Right.
matchup, and it just didn't go out to either one of those teams' expectations, and so. I do think this is a good Texas team, and Oklahoma fans can keep on calling me the sunshine pumper for saying that, but I think that this is the loss that you try to learn from, and if you're going forward from this point, you've got to win 4 of the next 6 in
Yeah.
order to really have a good shot, and at least a shot to make it to the playoffs. Because everyone's been saying it, like you mentioned, Oklahoma's really tough schedule. It comes down to it where 9-3, it gives you a really good chance to make
Oh,
the college
brother,
football playoffs.
I wouldn't put all your eggs in that basket as a South Carolina guy. That is not the case.
Oh no,
It,
exactly,
it
for
wasn't
sure.
a season ago. I always say this, like you're not wrong, and that's a logical way to look at it. But in this sport, especially, there's so many logic and reason usually fly out the window at the
Yeah,
very beginning. It's like anytime the NCAA or the college football playoff committee is involved, the last thing I expect is them to do the right thing. And
yeah,
like, and I'm not saying that even to be funny. It's I just like it is. You're what you're saying is correct. Like that's a really tough schedule. 9-3 should get you in. but we saw it last year. Hopefully, we don't see it again. I think 4-2 in the last 6 is probably what they need to shoot for. You're right. I'll tell you this too. Here's the one thing that people don't really understand with the Texas thing, or it feels like to me at least, which is you're right. People have kind of discarded them and think that they're not any good. Um, and that's fine. Like they haven't played very well, and so they don't deserve to be super high like on power rankings or whatever until were able to prove that. What they put on the field this year is not anywhere close to what people were saying they were going to be at the start of the year. But a lot of their issues as like the perception and optics of like, oh, Texas isn't any good. It's because people don't think Arch is good, and those two things aren't the same thing because, as you saw last year from Oklahoma, there's a whole other side of the ball away from the offense that is very important to a team's success, and that Texas defense hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah. Well, and I think going back to the 9-3, you know, it's I agree with you. And on top of that, I think the only thing with being 9-3 and making the playoffs is I just don't see a 9-3 team being able to win at all. I guess the same thing goes for a 10-2 team. I didn't see a 10-2 winning it all, especially as just kind of bland as Ohio State looked last year. I didn't think that they'd come out just looking on fire and just blow through everybody in the playoffs.
I thought the moment they made it, I was like, "There's no team that's better suited to win this entire thing than Ohio State," because you were going to get a Tennessee team at home that was flawed, and then you got. I didn't think it was going to be that one sided, but do you think about the talent they had and what they spent on the roster, and then you get to go replay Oregon, and you didn't have the extra game, it's oh man, but I get what you're saying too.
Yeah, well, and I think they were the most well equipped, but during the season they just didn't show being that team. You know, they didn't show off exactly what they showed in the playoffs. But anyways, kind of going down for Oklahoma. Obviously, the big one is the running game. That's been one all season long. It's just been completely silent. Now, just about everyone is speaking up and saying Jaden Knott is more of a liability being on the field, which is not what anyone saw coming. And I think when you look at that running back room, it now is starting to become a question: why are certain players not being played? And I know today Ben Arbuckle was questioned about Javonte Barnes not playing enough, especially last week when you were basically running the air raid offense, and he is your blocking back. And then Taylor Tatum just not really back to his full self for some reason. And there's a lot more behind the scenes that I think any of us really understand what's going on there. With this team, I think when you look at South Carolina right now and what they've done on defense, it seems like this is the week that if you're going to try to get that run game going, this might be the week to go ahead and give it a shot and try to do something.
Yeah, I hate that so much. I hate being the get right game. The odd thing sucks, dude. I thought that kid was so good at Cal, and it felt like he was one of the most underrated players in the country 2 years ago. He was fine last year, I guess, but at the same time, I don't remember him much last year. But I mean, but in 2023, man, he was awesome. He was awesome.
1,300 yards rushing. I mean, if I were to tell you that there was a running back, I think I saw Parker say this the other day on social media. It was like, if I were to tell you that there was a 1,300-yard running back on Oklahoma's roster, you would probably tell me it was Torrey Blaylock.
Right.
But no, he's a true freshman, and it's Jaden Knott who's struggling, who had the 1,300-yard season.
And you got a healthier offensive line this year, which is good. At least it gets in comparison to last year. But everyone's banged up. But I think if you're trying to establish the run against this team, I thought that's what LSU was going to try to do last week when just hearing hearing Brian Kelly talk to the media and how they that was a focus of emphasis about they need to finally start establishing the run. And that offensive line, which struggled all year long, it was the weakest unit on the entire team, gave up no sacks, which is, I'll just say it, Dylan Stewart was held like a newborn baby for most of that game on Saturday. And that's that position unit for South Carolina, the defensive ends, they are still, I think, maybe the best unit on the field because they were able to get upfield and get in the back, disrupt and a quarterback and all that kind of stuff. Disrupt the offensive line and get to the quarterback a ton this year. Like the pressures they've been able to have. It's not like last year's team. I don't think you're in danger of giving up 9 sacks like last year's game at all. But I mean, the best way to negate that a lot of times, or a guy like Dylan Stewart, is running right at him and taking him out of the game. So I think that's probably a good move. LSU was able to run the ball pretty well last Saturday against them. I think that the thing with Oklahoma, it almost feels like they're doing offensively what I wish South Carolina would do, which is they know that Mateer can run, and they're utilizing his legs. And
Yeah.
that is like what South Carolina fans have been begging for Mike Shula to do all year with Lenore Sellers. So I don't know if part of Mateer like kind of being the main and sometimes it feels like only guy in the offense, if that has somehow hampered the run game for Oklahoma. But it feels like it's not as like he is the show. Like you know what I mean? Like he is the show.
Yeah.
And sometimes if you got a Cadillac, I mean, like let it go. So I get that, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, like it's a thin defensive or interior defensive line for South Carolina. That's where you can make your hay if you're Oklahoma trying to run the football is in between the tackles, not really on the edges as much.
Yeah, and I think one thing too that I noticed what Texas was doing, another team that was really struggling to run the ball was instead of just stepping back and maybe some sort of I don't know any kind of shifts or any kind of
Mhm.
different formations there when you're trying to run block, just tell your guys to just get upfield and hit somebody,
Yeah,
explode off the ball and make contact first. And I think that's what made a lot of sense for Texas and obviously worked for them last week against Oklahoma. And they were able to get the ball going pretty well on the ground.
you're
I
not
feel like
gonna
that's
you're not gonna have that problem this week. I'll tell you that.
yeah,
Like I hate to say that because I want South Carolina to be a semblance of themselves from a season ago, and they just fired their offensive line coach. But dude, even without the offensive line issues, you've got four starters that were like by the second half of the LSU game, you had four starters that were out. I jokingly put out this tweet, and I was like, they've had Pepper get out of there. My dog is over here trying to get on the show. Um, they had so many injuries up front. Surratt goes out in the first half against LSU. They already had three starters out going into that game. And I made the joke. I was like, you're down so many players. At some point, you're going to have to get Chloe Kitts from the women's basketball team to play guard. And then she tore her ACL. And so it's like the injuries and attrition for this team have been awful. Like it's been awful. So I don't know which five they're going to throw out there. I do not think that you're going to have a ton of issues with South Carolina being able to run on Oklahoma like Texas was able to do.
yeah, absolutely. I think when you're going against an interior defensive line that's really struggling, you just gotta play your role.
Yeah.
And obviously this year too with Oklahoma, the offensive line kind of banged up, but they're making things work, and the pass blocking has been really good. That's what's really surprising with this team,
Yeah.
is not being able to run block, but you're pass blocking just fine. I guess we've kind of talked about the run game. Obviously, that is one where I think Oklahoma on offense matches up pretty well. Is there any other mismatches you think Oklahoma has an advantage over South Carolina coming into this matchup?
I mean, they're going to get the Sellers. I don't know if you saw the stat. This is like the craziest stat I've ever heard in college football. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. They finally ran him more. He had 22 carries on Saturday for LSU, against LSU. That's 8 more than he had in any other game this season. To put that in perspective, that's 1 less than he had in the first 3 games combined. 22 carries went for 19 total yards. He ran during the game for a total of 894 yards in that game. Like
That is just crazy, isn't it?
I've never heard of anything like that in my life. I don't know if that includes pregame warmups. I don't know if that includes jogging off the field, but my goodness, man. So I think that the ends will be able to get after this offensive line pretty well. I'm not saying it's going to be like what we saw against Auburn. I pray it's not like that. But I will also say this, and don't kill me, Sooner fans. I don't think you're going to have to run as many trick plays to the boundary and hiding receivers against South Carolina. There's some strengths here for South Carolina. They are on the cusp of like I hope being able to break through in some cases, and like the run game got going a little bit against LSU, but they have not been able to keep Lenore Sellers upright, and I think that's the biggest concern. If they could somehow get help from anyone else in the passing game or in the run game, I think you have a chance, especially with it being at home. It's their first true road game. But the biggest thing too, even when you look at that, it's an 11:45 start. Like it's 12:45
Yeah,
there, but it's like so even Williams Bryce will be probably a little bit less of its full potential because of just the time of kickoff. So I think it'll be a good game. It just feels like it's one of those things where Oklahoma has a little bit too much depth to pull away in the second half.
well, and for South Carolina too, this is a team much like Oklahoma. I mean, even more so than Oklahoma, I think, in my perspective, is that they had such preseason hype coming into this season.
Yeah.
I really felt like there was a lot of promising things for South Carolina, bringing things back and trying to make that 9-3 season from a
Yeah.
season ago into 10-2 or 11-1. And it really seemed like they could do some of that. And obviously, the loss to Vanderbilt kind of started the spiral down. You lose to Missouri, and now just last week against LSU, and now you're sitting here at 3-3. It's a fan base that really isn't. It's beat up. It's let down. So I feel like the fan base alone is already going to be kind of quieter. But then you bring up the point that it's the early time slot. And that definitely takes it away. Where this is Oklahoma's first true road test as well. I mean, I know they had at Temple, but that's Temple. So.
This will be different.
Exactly.
I will tell you this: the crowd outside the stadium will be much nicer than what you've experienced in Philly. I can tell you that firsthand. And I got to run here now, if that because I got to do this other show. But I will tell you this last thing too. The only thing I'll say for South Carolina, and this is the last week I'm going to buy in. I feel like. I mean, it probably won't. I'm sure it'll be one of those things now moving forward that as I do, that you get into these weeks now, especially if your team's kind of struggling. You're like, there's no way we're going to win on Monday. And somehow by Thursday and Friday, you're like, we got a chance, baby. We got a chance. So I'm sure that's where I'll end up going in the future. But I think for South Carolina, you had last year, you were 3-3, and it felt like the sky was falling, and you had some bad losses, and the offense was terrible. And for whatever reason, however they did it, Dowell Loggins, the OC then, was able to flip a switch and kind of turn things around, and they were able to win those last 6 games of the season. That started with Oklahoma. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen, but we have precedent and a track record, so I'm fingers crossed for our guys that it does.
All right, Chris, real quick before you go, can you give me a score prediction, and then I'll also let my listeners know where they can find all your work?
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. This is a blast. I'm going to say 27-20 Oklahoma.
Okay, I like that one. And then where do we find all your stuff?
No, it's all bad takes. Vern_Funquist on Twitter, and then Vern Funquist CFB on Instagram as well. We have a Locked On Gamecocks, and then I do the Fourth and Wrong podcast with a buddy of mine as well. So I appreciate it, man. I had a good time. We'll have to do it again soon.
Absolutely. I'll catch you later. Thanks.
Brother.
All right, everybody. That was Chris Marler, very similar to Josh Mahler, but Marler with an R in there instead of the H. Anyways, appreciate him jumping on, making some time tonight to be able to come on here and kind of preview a little bit of that game. I really think when you look at this matchup, it's a matchup that I think Oklahoma fans feel like this is a game that you've got to win. It's a get-right game. It's a bounce-back game. It's a game that you've got the one loss on the season. You don't want to take any more. You look at it, and it really is a game that for Oklahoma can be that game that propels you in the right direction to feeling like you've got a chance at a 10-win season. And I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility for Oklahoma. I think when you're being completely realistic with the loss against Texas, Oklahoma just has to look at that loss against Texas for what it really is. And I think I just posted something earlier on social media, either today or yesterday about this, but I really think that I really think that Texas is getting back on the right track. And I think they could win out all but maybe one of their games. And I think one of those losses might be to Georgia or Texas A&M. I think they really do show out to be a much better team the rest of the season. And I really hope that they don't prove me wrong on that point. But I think that this is a Texas team that is getting right. I think they got right against Oklahoma, and I hate that that's the case, but that's what it seems to be. And so anyways, I really think that the loss to Texas isn't as bad as Oklahoma fans want to make it out to be. Now, I do want to kind of talk about some of the things that I've seen on social media, some of the comments and things like that. Texas did own this game. All right. So it was a dominant game. I don't care what stats you want to pull up. Texas dominated Oklahoma. And I'm not really sure where Oklahoma fans are grasping to try to say, see, it really wasn't a domination. I mean, yeah, you can take away the punt return, but I'm not even going to count that. All right. So let's just pretend like the punt return didn't happen because it was a block in the back. Okay, whatever. Texas still dominated that game. Even if this is a, what would that be, 16-6 game? I know it's only 10 points, but that still was a domination from Texas. I think Texas just came out there and they owned every part of that game. And I think Texas, again, going back to week one, I think Oklahoma fans look at that and say, see, they struggled against Ohio State. They just looked bad. I think both teams struggled, and that's why it was such a close game. Texas started to kind of get things going late. They came out and they started to kind of get things right against San Jose State, if timeline is correct here. And then who else did they have on their schedule there? And then, of course, you got Sam Houston in there where it felt like they kind of got some things corrected. And then you have Florida, and you just didn't perform well. And again, I think that was a trap game for Texas, and it woke them up. So ultimately, I think the Sooners are not that far away from a 9-win season, which I think anyone at the beginning of the season, any Oklahoma fan was saying that a 9-win season this year feels like the right move. Like you're moving in the right direction. You have an incredibly tough schedule. So if you can win 9 games and in those 3 games make it respectable, one of them was not respectable. You got blown out by Texas, really. Texas dominated Oklahoma. So you've got to kind of put that one aside and say, okay, if we do end up losing 2 more to end this season 9-3, the way that a lot of fans felt like was the right direction for this program, then it has to be really close. Let's say that you lose on the road in Tuscaloosa. It's a really close matchup there. Let's say that I don't know, whatever other team, if Ole Miss or LSU were to come in and beat Oklahoma, that you just couldn't get a few things to go your the way that you wanted them to go. It can't be another double-digit loss. It just can't be. And if it is, then even a 9-3 season just isn't going to look good, because I don't think Oklahoma makes it in with 9-3 if you lost against Texas by double digits, and then you lost by double digits somewhere else 2 other times. If you were to lose 3 games by double digits, you're just not making it in. I don't care how good you looked in those 9 wins. I just don't think that's the case. I think if you were to have a really close game and maybe a couple of things, for example, that Auburn game, if that Auburn game would have gone the other way for Auburn, like how close they were to beating Oklahoma, that's the kind of losses that Oklahoma would have to have if they were to go forward. And so you just can't have the second half of what that was, and you just got to move on from it. Ultimately, kind of going down through a few things that I had kind of pieced together from South Carolina when I'm looking through South Carolina. I think Oklahoma just really has to look at this South Carolina team and recognize, like Chris and I were mentioning a moment ago, that they do have some defensive line struggles. I think that interior of the defensive line, and it gives Oklahoma some room to be able to run the ball and run it inside. Give it to your backs. Give it to Torrey Blaylock. I don't know why Xavier Robinson isn't getting more play time. I don't know if Javonte Barnes is ready to roll. I'm not really sure if you keep on trying to do anything with the Jade Knott experience or if you just kind of give up altogether. But I think that's there. So I think that this is the game that you get something going, but you don't have to, because I think that if John Mateer gets the full week of practice, I think it's going to be just fine. With Chris's prediction, he was saying 27-20, if I'm remembering that correctly. He said 27-20, Oklahoma wins. That's assuming that somehow South Carolina hangs 20 points on this Oklahoma defense. I'm not really sure about that, so we'll definitely have to chat with him a little bit more and try to figure that out. If he really thinks that that South Carolina offense can hang 20 points on Oklahoma's defense. But then Oklahoma scoring 27, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, because you go back to it till last week. There were several times where Oklahoma was getting themselves into scoring position, and it was called back because of a holding, then throws an interception. That kind of stuff happened a lot there against Texas. And so you minimize the penalties, you win the turnover margin. You got to stop losing the turnover margin. Oklahoma is looking absolutely atrocious when it comes down to the turnover margin this year. And you've got to get yourself right in that direction. I think when you look at Oklahoma and what they've done so far this season on defense, of course, we looked at that game against Kent State, where they finally got a couple of turnovers, one of them being a defensive scoop and score. We really felt like that could be the one that turned it around for Oklahoma. They end up doing something to be able to get themselves right, and it just wasn't the case against Texas at all. They are -7 in the turnover ratio margin right now, and that's something that Oklahoma's got to win. But I think that this is a South Carolina team that's very. It's a game that Oklahoma is very capable of winning in that regard. Another one for South Carolina, I haven't seen a whole lot of just really good, successful passing in the passing game for South Carolina. I think Oklahoma's secondary is going to do just fine. And so obviously, if that's the case, you feel a lot more comfortable with a lot more that man coverage and maybe forcing South Carolina to try to pass the ball a little bit more. Excuse me as I take a quick swig of water. I know I've got somebody that likes to give me a hard time. No water breaks in the chat. But this really feels like a game. I feel confident with Oklahoma. Now, I understand for a lot of Oklahoma fans, the confidence just kind of went out the window. The confidence was just not there now because of the loss to Texas. And I think those same Oklahoma fans are just not willing to admit that Texas is a good team. Texas will keep on climbing up. We will see if they end up losing another one to Georgia or Texas A&M. If they end up winning out, that I think Oklahoma fans will finally be like, wow, okay, I guess that really wasn't too bad. I don't know if that's the case. I think Texas does lose one more game throughout the season, and they end up 9-3. And in their shoes, if they were 9-3 and Oklahoma was 9-3, that looks a lot better for them because Oklahoma they won all of their non-conference games, where one of Texas's losses was to Ohio State, non-conference. And to Chris's point earlier, I think that's kind of crucial for any team to kind of lose earlier on, because first off, it's earlier on in the season, so you forget about it a little bit more. You forget about that loss a little bit more later on in the season, but then also you don't have the loss on the conference record, and that's really big. So losing those non-conference games definitely hurts you a lot less. But ultimately for Oklahoma, I think this really is it's a must-win, a bounce-back type of game. And I think you've got to kind of move past a lot of what we're hearing so far this week. You're hearing a lot from the media, anyways, interviewing some of the players, some of the coaches. Is you're hearing that the run game is just not going to get going. It's not even a mediocre or bad offensive line. It is an offensive line that is not able to run block. They're, like I mentioned a moment ago, they're able to pass block just fine, but then it comes to run block situations where Oklahoma is just struggling there. And I think a lot more of that has to be a lot less, kind of specific schemes. And I'm trying to think of a good way to, I'm not good at explaining these things, but if I were to have a chalkboard in front of me, I could kind of show you. So some of the shifts and things like that you're going to do on the offensive line just need to go away. And you just need to find the first man. You need to explode off the ball and hit somebody. You get aggressive. And that's the only way you're going to win in that run blocking scheme right now, is just force your offensive line just to find the first person in front of them and hit them. You have to break it down to elementary at this point, because it's just not going to work. And another big thing that I think Oklahoma fans are kind of pointing out, and I think a lot in the media, they're all pointing out, is that most of the time when you hire an offensive coordinator, he's the one that gets to decide who's on his offensive staff. And for Oklahoma, for some reason, they're just not letting offensive coordinators pick their own staffs. And, as much as I will not come on here and call for coaches' jobs, because that's not what I do. I think ultimately it comes down to inside the building. I'm not the type that's going to come on here and try to call for coaches' jobs. Now, I will agree that there are certain coaches that I just don't have a defense for. But when it comes down to it, I think Ben Arbuckle, when he's coming in, I think he should be given the free range. If you trust him to take over your system, you need to trust him to hire his own staff. And if part of that hiring his own staff means that he wants to keep guys like Joe John Finley, and he wants to keep guys like DeMarco Murray, and he wants to keep guys like Bill Bedenbaugh, then so be it. He should be allowed to do so. And I think if he wants to get rid of those guys, I think you have to give him the freedom to say, okay, you are the offensive coordinator. You are the coach that runs that side of the ball. Therefore, we're going to give you the guys that you want on that side of the ball. And that just hasn't been the case at Oklahoma. Now, I haven't really delved into it to really find out how and why that's been the case at Oklahoma. But if you're going to get better in that offensive scheme, you have to get guys that are willing to help and adapt and find ways to win and find ways to make your offense fit the scheme that you were running as an offensive coordinator. That just hasn't been the case here at Oklahoma. Right now, it just doesn't seem like your offensive line and your tight ends and your running backs are all working together and they're all on the same page. It just doesn't feel like that's the case for Oklahoma right now. And so they've got to find a way to get that going. And I'll dive to the chat because I think you guys are saying a lot of what I've got kind of on my mind. First off, corrections 101. Chris is a great guest. Yeah, I like Chris a lot. Of just kind of recently kind of come across some of his stuff. I know I've seen a little bit of his stuff on Lockdown. Go check him out. I'll make sure to get a link down in the description below so you guys can go check out him. But over on X, he's kind of a one of these guys that likes to roast people and kind of I mean he's a funny guy. I absolutely enjoy having him on. I'm sure I'll have him on more throughout the season as well because he's a great guy. Going to Jimmy Satterfield, he says, can Oklahoma even score 27 points? I think against South Carolina you can. And I think when John Mateer comes back with a full week of practice and feeling healthier and more confident, he's ticked off after that loss last week against Texas. He is. And you can tell in his demeanor, I think it was yesterday on Monday, about how he felt like he performed in that game. And he knows that he just did not perform well. He knows that he missed a lot of open guys. He knows that he was not seeing the field the way that he ought to see it. I know that John Mateer wants to correct that game and correct himself after that horrible game. He knows more than anyone that he had a bad game. He takes full responsibility. And you know what? I think that's why fans rally around him and why his team is going to rally around him. That's why I think that they're going to rally around him is just because he takes responsibility. He takes ownership for the things that he knows he can control. And I really do think that he's going to try to right his wrongs from that Texas game. Going to Modern Day Caveman, he says, fans don't realize that we have one more year of this mediocre O-line. Remember, all our linemen that are injured will be returning next season, so nothing will change. I'm not exactly sure how you mean that exactly, Modern Day Caveman, but I do think this year, after this year, you're going to have Michael Fasusi, Ryan Foje, who are going to have a lot more experience. And you've also got a lot more young guys. You think of all the young guys that Bill Bedenbaugh is bringing in or who has already brought in. I know I'm forgetting a few, and I should have put them down because we're talking about the offensive line tonight. So I don't know why I wouldn't have. But with young guys like Caden Penny and like Cooper Hackett that are coming in, you've got such a young group that is coming in under Bill Bedenbaugh, and we know his track record. And I know you can't keep on defending him just because of his track record. You've got to see what he's putting on the field today. And so, I can't defend that. I can't, and I'm not going to sit here and try to pretend like I can. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, I think you have to take as a fan, put yourself in the coach's position where you've got to decide, okay, so I'm not getting the production out of Bill Bedenbaugh, but I do know that he's been having some guys that have gone through a lot of health issues, and I know that he's got a lot of young guys that are going to be ready next year. It feels like they're going to be ready, and I know that he's building onto those young guys that are coming into this program. So am I willing to just put it all away, or do I think that group of young guys is going to work out? And that's ultimately what this coaching staff has to decide. I think it's hard for me to just call that a coach is ready to be done, because there's so much that goes into that. And for Bill Bedenbaugh, it's even harder because of his past and because of what he's done for Oklahoma and the types of offensive lines that he's had at Oklahoma in the past and what we know he's got brewing. And so it's hard, because if you get rid of him, do some of those young guys now not come to Oklahoma? And are you willing to give that up? I don't know. I'm not, but I understand where fans are at. You just can't keep on. You can't keep on putting it off. So when does it become enough? And I get that. I understand that from the fan base 100%. And hopefully you guys can kind of see my perspective on that as well, is that it is much harder when you talk about a guy like Bill Bedenbaugh and how highly regarded he is. Now, could he get some help in? Is he taking help from guys like maybe Kevin Johns? Uh, Not Kevin Johns. Thinking Kevin Wilson. Don't know why I'm getting names mixed up here again tonight, guys. But is he taking guys like Kevin Wilson and utilizing him? Is Kevin Wilson stepping in and being able to give some of his recommendations or helping out here and there? I don't know. I don't know all of the behind the scenes stuff, and so I'm just willing to admit that. All right, one more chat here. Bastiat, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but without a viable running game, I would not pick OU to win any other game this season. All right, but what if without that viable running game, they just dedicated this offense to being an air raid offense? Because I think it just dedicating it, and I think if Oklahoma would have just ran a true air raid offense last week, you probably would have seen more success than you saw. Now, I don't know if that means that John Mateer throws 4 interceptions now instead of 3. I don't know. I think if Oklahoma were just to recognize that they don't have a run game and just focus on running a true air raid offense. It's not an air raid offense. I know a lot of fans want to try to call it that. It's not, because what Ben Arbuckle runs, if you look back at Washington State, he actually likes to run the ball a lot. He has a lot of running game in his game. And so if Oklahoma were just to switch over to just going all out air raid, would that be better for this offense? And then if that's the case, again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, why are you not putting Javonte Barnes in much more? Because I think he is the obvious back for this type of system. He is blocking really well. Now, I think Torrey Blaylock is doing an exceptionally great job at that as well, but it's not Jaden Ott. You put Javonte Barnes and you put Torrey Blaylock, the two guys that are your workhorses and doing the right things. And then you've got guys like Xavier Robinson, who I think can be that guy out of the backfield and doing something there. I am really concerned, and I think Parker was mentioning this over on OU Insider a lot this week, where I am really concerned that some of these good backs that Oklahoma wants to see on their roster next year, they might be gone. There's some good backs that I'm concerned about. I think Torrey Blaylock would probably still be here regardless of what happens. But, I think, man, how do I say this? I think when you have the type of offense that is being ran here and the running backs aren't getting their fair shot, guys like Xavier Robinson, guys like Javonte Barnes at that, why would they want to stick around? And even some of the younger guys, why would they want to stick around when they're not being utilized? It feels like they're being told that they're not good enough. And I don't know how I feel about that. Jimmy Satterfield says, BV says Barnes was injured. I didn't see BV say that. I know that Ben Arbuckle was asked about it, and he just said that it's just been that way. It's just that it's kind of worked out that way where he hasn't been on the field. It's not anything particular. It's just that it hasn't worked out for him to be on the field. That's the way that Ben Arbuckle explained it. So if BV did say that he's been injured, then I'll take that. I mean, Barnes has been injured a lot in the past. I don't think that's the case this year. From what I understand, I don't think he's really been truly injured. Going over to Lone Wolf, why would Hawkins want to stick around? Yeah, I think Hawkins would want to stick around because he knows that he's working on this system. Now, if John Mateer were to come back next year, I don't know why Michael Hawkins would want to stick around. I really don't. I don't know. I'm kind of curious about how all of that would go down if John Mateer were to stick around. I don't know. But I think that this running back room has been definitely the one that is the most questionable. The offensive line just seems like it keeps on having a good reason rather than excuses. Yeah, you're getting injured, and so that's kind of the reason. But then we back it up with, why are they getting injured so much more? Why are they being injured so frequently? I think this offensive line is just, I don't know. I'm really concerned. I don't understand what's going on there and how they're getting injured so often, because you go back to the good old days of these Joe Moore type offensive lines that Oklahoma's used to having. Guys with, when they had Cody Ford and Creed Humphrey or Orlando Brown. I'm drawing a blank on more they had right there in that era. This is, I mean, Oklahoma was known there for a while for being offensive, O-line the offensive line university that produced great guys. So I think, I think there's something there, because all of those guys back then didn't get injured so frequently. Drew Samia, that was another guy that I was trying to think of. I think the frequency of how often they're getting injured is very concerning. I think fans have every right to be concerned with that much. I see you guys say, BV did say today. I guess I just missed that part. My bad on my part. But I know that before that, though, I think that's what Ben Arbuckle was talking about, that just throughout the season, he really hasn't been in. Throughout the season, Barnes has not been in. And he just kind of says that it's just hasn't worked out in his favor. And I just think that's ridiculous. I think there's this type of system, when you know that you're struggling, Barnes has to be the guy to go in there, because you're not going to expect him to block as much, you're not going to expect him to run as much, because that's not what his strong suit is. He is that guy. He's been used out of the backfield and seems like he does a really good job there. And if you get him in open space, I think he can work. I think he's a tough dude. He fights forward for extra yards. He's just not the best at finding those zones and power gaps and stuff like that. So I think when you look at Barnes, he's the guy that should be in there blocking in a lot of this air raid type offense. I mean, because that's what Oklahoma should be going over to, that air raid / QB run offense. Ultimately, I think there's a lot of question marks for Oklahoma, but some of those question marks could be not completely put to rest against South Carolina, but I think against South Carolina, they can at least be put to ease a little bit. You can start to feel a little bit more confident about this team if you beat South Carolina in a really good fashion. And I'm thinking, if you were able to beat South Carolina 24-10, 24-6 even, if you were able to really pull out a really good double-digit win, I think that would be, the way that Oklahoma bounces back. And I mean, heck, if you can really blow them out and put up 30 points on them, I think that would really start to make fans feel a lot more confident in this team and going back to how confident they felt about Oklahoma when they were 5-0. But ultimately, like I've been saying so far this week, I think you just have to look at Oklahoma and bounce back and just reflect back on when Oklahoma was 5-0. Reflect on how you felt about Oklahoma being 5-0 and how you felt like, man, this is a team that 9-3, 10-2 is totally on the table. Some people even feeling like, man, 11-1, that would feel really good. And I was never going to be that delusional. I think this is just way too hard of a schedule to go 10-2, to go 11-1. I think 10-2, like I said, it's still on the table if Oklahoma can start to fix some of their wrongs against Texas. And I think that was a bad game from Oklahoma. I think I forget who said it, but somebody said in a press conference that just a lot of guys had a bad game and really nobody had a good game. And for this week, I wanted to come out and say that as well. This week, we didn't even have a Voice of College Football Player of the Week. We talked about it, and it was just really hard for us to give that award away to anyone because it just didn't feel like anyone had a good game. Even on defense, where the defense didn't play bad, there were still certain things that we look at on film, and it's just it's tough to take one player and say you had a good game in a game that was just such a botched game like that. So we ended up kind of going away from it and just deciding not to do that, not to have our Player of the Week this week. But anyways, that's all I've got for you guys tonight. I know it was kind of really not even that short of a show. It feels like this show just kind of flew right by. I know that I didn't get to have Chris on as long as I wanted to, but I thank Chris Marler for joining me here tonight and being able to kind of preview the South Carolina game a little bit. We're going into week 8, guys. It's getting much closer. Oklahoma is 5-1. Just recognize that. Remember that. Oklahoma is 5-1, 1-1 in the conference. Big week where Oklahoma has got to turn things around. They've got to. Obviously, they're not going to fix everything right now this week. It's too quick of a turnaround, but they can start to put some confidence back in the fans, and give them a little bit of a morale boost for sure. So South Carolina this week, make sure to join in here again on Thursday. Excuse me. Join in here on Thursday, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will be live, and I believe probably having another great guest to join us on Thursday. So make sure to join us on Thursday evening. And then, of course, on Saturday, post-game, we're going to be right here. And then Sunday again at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. Make sure to join and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Sorry, I was trying to read something that popped up down on the bottom of my screen as I'm trying to say this. But hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Thank you all so much for joining. If you would, scan that QR code over there. It's a little harder for me today because I'm not in studio, but scan that QR code or click the link down in the description below and just go down there and join. Become a member today. Join the membership program for as low as $2.99 a month to help support us here on the channel. Of course, we're cranking out content for you guys Sundays, Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday post-game. It's a lot of content, a lot of work goes into what we're doing here. I want to thank everybody so much for joining in, and of course, YouTube Evo. We appreciate you joining in here just to remind us of how horrible Oklahoma has been against Texas here recently. But we thank everybody so much for joining, being a part of this great community. We'll catch you all next time. Boomer.